Purple Dawn of Mankind by Troy McLachlan. In the beginning, there was only darkness. Yet in that darkness there was already Raven. He was still small and weak, and his special powers had not fully developed. From an Eskimo creation myth, Raven being their version of the Saturn archetype. C. M. Wood, Heroes and Hunters, from North American Indian Mythology. New York, 1982, page 17. Before the golden age of Saturn, or Kronos, as he was known to the Greeks, a time in which mankind was said to have enjoyed a tranquil and plentiful existence, bathed in the flawless light of a perfect and timeless sun. There was a primordial dawn of eternal twilight. In the earliest legend, with which the recital, i.e. the Kojiki, opens, one recognizes the primal myth, the development from a primordial darkness and chaos. This is the Kronos legend, in its 1,000 forms, the father of all mythologies, upon which so many peoples have constructed their cosmogonies. P. Wheeler, The Sacred Scriptures of the Japanese, New York, 1952, page 387, as quoted by Dordu Cardona, Godstar, 2006. Some mythological cycles feature a primitive age of darkness before the existence of the sun, when human beings lived in a state of anarchy without the techniques of civilized life. H. Osborne, South American Mythology, Mythology of the Americas, London, 1970, page 294, is quoted with emphasis by Dordu Cardona, Godstar, 2006, page 278. Note in the second of the two above quotes the reference to an age of darkness before the existence of the sun. According to E. A. S. Butterworth, the sun of the ancients is not the natural sun of heaven, for it neither rises nor sets, but is, as it seems, ever in the zenith above the navel of the world. There are signs of an ambiguity between the pole star and the sun. Yet those words belie what mythology is inferring when it speaks of an age of darkness. We should not construe this age to be one that was black as night, but rather that the available light was subdued and hued with a distinctive color that would come to be associated with Saturn. Tecowatl, an alter ego for Quetzalcoatl, Aztec Saturn, who is credited as being the first light at creation, is the god of the dawn light that was created before the sun. The Roman poet Martinius Capella provides a clue as to what color this light was when he has the goddess Harmonia declaring that the rays from the god Jupiter renew the purple dawn for men, an obvious reference to a previous age before Jupiter's ascent in place of Saturn. The Hopi tribe of North America have songs that talk of a dark purple light of creation coming from the north, while the Chinese still refer to the celestial northern pole region as the purple pole. In all cases, and many others, the color purple is linked to Saturn, especially during a primordial time remembered in mythology as the dawn of creation. What this tells us is that there once was a distantly ancient age wrapped in a sea of dark celestial purple, a purplish light that radiated a dense and global warmth that seems to have emanated from a single dull orb, shining at a time well before the arrival of the sun. We see today this glowing disk appears to have been permanently stationed at the far north of the heavens, as the late researcher Dordu Cardona surmised. The evidence of myth, which points to Saturn having once occupied a position above Earth's north polar regions, is voluminous. There is not a race on Earth that has not preserved at least one account which states as much. According to this evidence, Saturn occupied a central position in the north celestial regions. It rotated, and rotated widely, but other than that, it was immovable. Cardona, 78. It is this darkened and primordial sun, this dull and immovable orb, that would eventually become the god and planet known as Saturn. But before Saturn rose to his status as the great creator god of mythology, primordial man spoke of this time as the great dream time of our distant past, a time celebrated in the oral and written traditions, ancient peoples the world over. Like a man was the sun when it showed itself. It showed itself when it was born and remained fixed in the sky like a mirror. Certainly, it was not the same sun which we see, it is said in their old tales, the Popol Vuh, Mesoamerican creation story. According to this understanding, at that time, there was no bright yellow sun as we know it today, one that rises in the east and sets in the west. There was no way to calculate the passage of time, to tell day from night. No stars could be seen through the dense atmospheric purple haze that engulfed the heaven. There was no moon from which to tell the passing of time by its phases. or by which the Earth's ocean could be influenced by great tidal forces. Humanity lived in a perpetual state of dusky darkness, everything wrapped within a warm and bountiful purple hue that permeated all existence and in which the nocturnal thrived. Like a giant blind reddish purple eye looking onto the world from within a swirling heavenly purple chaos, primordial man would have seen Saturn as a single pale disk of light radiating its benign presence from a position locked at Earth's celestial north. It had always been there, a presence that was an integral yet silently ethereal part of the Earth's landscape and mankind's experience. For how long this state of affairs had lasted, it is impossible to tell. How life on Earth may have looked during the age known as the Purple Dawn, when Earth was in orbit around primordial Saturn circa 100,000 BC. Saturn can be seen in its primeval state as magenta-hued sub-brown dwarf star. Saturn's famous rings had not yet formed at this time. The murky existence of life on Earth, as suggested the earliest mythological narratives and portrayed in the previous, would have belied the even and global warmth that allowed humans to walk unclothed and troubled by weather extremes. While a semi-nocturnal world seems at odds with modern concepts of what would be a healthy planetary environment, the supposed need for bright sunlight and a rotating calendar of seasons to support life is overstated. All that would be required for the sustaining of a habitable planet is precisely what the myth suggests primordial man enjoyed: an adequate amount of evenly radiated heat energy with a minimum red-blue light spectrum required for photosynthesis in predominantly psilocybin-based plants. Much in the same way that we observe coastal areas supporting submerged red algae under the filtering effects of the oceans, so too would the Earth's primordial environment under Saturn have enjoyed a radiating filtered heat in which red-hued vegetation would have flourished. A collection of pioneering alternative theorists have, in recent decades, sought to identify this dull primordial sun of mythology as having been a brown dwarf star, a fairly common celestial object that would have radiated energy in the red-blue-purple spectrum, rather than the red-green bright light of the sun we see today. Accordingly, when factoring ancient descriptions of the god Saturn in his primordial state, we can determine that if Saturn was indeed a brown dwarf star, then Saturn would have typically produced its own far-reaching heliosphere, or what electric universe proponents call a plasma sheath, a type of electrical bubble which would have extended out into space like a giant egg-like cocoon. The startling supposition is that an electric cocoon of this type would have embraced the Earth and all its inhabitants. The inside of this hypothesized plasma bubble would have acted like a dull mirror, a reflective field that would have uniformly bounced the star's warm radiation back onto all parts of the planet's surface to produce the even purplish primordial glow related to us by these ancient traditions. That's probably where we get light shows from. This reflected light and energy would have produced warm regions at both poles, while almost entirely negating meteorological effects like wind and rain. Weather features so common today under the current sun. To the ancients of the Gold, Silver, and Bronze Ages, this dull moon-like disk from the time of the Purple Dawn came to be identified as the sleeping form of the god Kronos, Greek, or Saturn, Latin. In other cultures, it would come to be known as Ra, Egyptian. Enlil, Mesopotamia, Tlaloc, Aztec, later transformation into Quetzalcoatl, and Shangdi, China. Though modern mythologists would later confuse many of these deities as being representations of our current yellow sun, an alternative interpretation of comparative mythology suggests they all share common identity traits with the Roman god Saturn, who was in turn identified directly with the planet Saturn. And that's the problem, is these interpretations later changed a lot of these gods. I've noticed that. Alchemical traditions have it that this planet Saturn was our original and best sun, the first sun, before the coming of the red-yellow star we call today the sun. Today, this very same pale disk, spoken of in the earliest creation epics of mythology and seen inhabiting Earth's celestial north, can be positively identified as being the actual planet Saturn, at a time when it was in its primordial state as a brown dwarf star. Yet today, the same planet which was said to have once ruled the heavens from up high in the north is now a distant spot of light seen at the outer reaches of our current solar system. But it is the eventful and often frightening journey that the primordial Saturn would take on its path to the outer reaches of the solar system that has become the historic basis for much of the world's mythology and mankind's memory of a once great golden age. It is the forgotten journey that Saturn took from being Earth's primordial sun to its current position as a distant ring gas giant that will help explain the influence of the god Saturn over the warped occult phenomenon central to this work, the Saturn death cult. Locating Earth's original geomagnetic North Pole. It is important to note that Earth's geomagnetic pole would have been in a completely different position at this time to where it is today, hat tip to Ted Holden. With Earth's current geographic North Pole region having been originally pointed at its original brown dwarf sun, the planet's geomagnetic field would have necessarily still been orientated in line with its celestial north despite its phase-locked equatorial relationship with Saturn. However, this would have positioned a phase-locked Earth's geomagnetic North Pole in a very different position. The best contender for where primordial Earth's geomagnetic north could once have been is strongly suggested by two significant bulges in the Earth's crust. These two bulges happen to be on opposite sides of Earth to each other. The larger one is called the Pacific Bulge, and it is located on the North Pacific's ocean floor between Hawaii and Asia. The smaller bulge is located on the opposite side of the planet in the South Atlantic. If Earth's current northern polar region was always pointed at Saturn as it orbited in phase lock, then Earth's geomagnetic north might likely have been located where the Pacific Bulge is today. Being the bigger of the two opposing bulges, the Pacific Bulge is the best candidate for Earth's original point of geomagnetic north, the bulge having been a possible consequence of Earth's original and differently orientated geomagnetic gravitational forces. The same would have been true, to a lesser degree, in the creation of opposing Atlantic-African bulge. Currently, Earth also has significant bulges in the Arctic and Antarctic regions, where the current geomagnetic north and south poles are found. In the age of the dinosaurs, Earth's distant primordial phase-locked relationship with Saturn was most likely the environment experienced by the dinosaurs while they still walked the Earth. Most animals are nocturnal by nature. The permanent gloom of this time would have suited any nocturnal species, including dinosaurs. The heavy ultraviolet light shed by Saturn was the same beneficial ultraviolet light used today by reptilian pet owners to provide their pets with a basking spot in their enclosures. Reptiles in particular find this kind of ultraviolet light to their liking, as do most species of insects that see best in ultraviolet spectrum. Saturn's infrared spectrum would have also served most mammals well, the vast majority of which are nocturnal. While mammals internally produce their own vitamin C, pigs and humans are the salient exception. Under these postulated Saturnian light conditions, pigs and humans would have needed to eat sources of vitamin C in order to stay healthy. Previous image, Earth during the age of the dinosaurs. The primordial brown dwarf star Saturn sat stationary as Earth orbited Saturn in a phase lock. The future Arctic region was always pointed at Saturn. Geomagnetic North Pole was most likely situated where the present Pacific Bulge is located. A permanent purple twilight saturated the Earth, with Saturn's plasma bubble appearing like a vast heavenly chaotic ocean. The even purple-hued light shed by Saturn and its plasma bubble cast no shadows, and the air was gently still. No rain clouds formed on the Earth, but Saturn's water misted down onto Earth's surface in a dense, humid vapor. Saturn's ultraviolet light spectrum would have been highly beneficial for nocturnal reptilian species. Great.
reptilian species, huh? So now we find out that the purple dawn was most conducive for reptiles. I wonder if there's anything to that, the David Icke stuff. I wouldn't be surprised. Have you heard of the Emerald Tablets by Thoth? It just so happens the reptile is green. Apparently they were found under a Mayan temple in Mexico. He says in it that one day they will attack those who reside beneath us. How about that? The megafauna giants of the past. Earth's electrical relationship to its primordial brown dwarf star Saturn would have produced a variable and lesser gravity, according to the electric universe principles. This would have allowed for the development of gigantic proportions in many species, most now extinct due to Earth's heavier gravity. When the gigantic fossilized remains of dinosaurs were first discovered, it was assumed that creatures this large would have had to buoy their massive weights by spending their lives in marshes and swamps. But subsequent discoveries have conclusively proven that these monsters spent their lives on dry land. They became the impossible dinosaurs because nobody could work out how their physical structures would have supported their own bulk under current gravitational conditions. Much has been postulated in attempts to explain this challenge to the accepted modern-day physics model that calls for Earth's gravity to have been a constant throughout its existence. These explanations have been inconclusive in the opinion of this writer, mostly because they are usually an effort to fit the evidence of the fossil record with the gravitational environment we observe today. But the more obvious solution is that the dinosaurs, and even some more of the recent mammalian giants, must have thrived during a time when Earth's gravity was much weaker. Earth must have enjoyed a nocturnal purple light glow and a lower level of gravity during its pre-human past. And this would have facilitated not only the development of larger animals and insects, but also much larger plants and trees. A thick, oxygen-rich atmosphere during its earliest existence would have complemented a lower gravity to allow for the flight of huge pteranodons and the giant insects that we know existed in the very distant past. The successful flight of such creatures with present gravity is doubtful, actually impossible. Golden Age. A time of bliss and plenty, the fabled Golden Age of mankind existed for the duration of Saturn's precarious life as Earth's polar sun, a position threatened by the unstable nature of the newly born planet Venus and the encroachment of the Sun and its own planetary satellites. While initial contact between the plasma sheaths of both the Saturnian system and the Sun had been catastrophic for life on Earth, it also brought about the impetus for the rise of civilization and the golden age of exploration. Time and measure could now be put to use in surveying a world which would give its bounty freely due to the continued radiating warmth of the flared Saturn. But that was not the end of the cataclysmic events stalking the Earth. What was known as the Golden Age would in fact be permeated with catastrophic episodes that would eventually lead up to one of the greatest cataclysmic events in human experience, the Great Deluge, under a new sun. In the time after Saturn experienced its first contact with the electrical influence of the Sun, the new look Saturnian system spiraled away back into interstellar space. As noted before, the Sun now could be seen from Earth as a distant light rising in the east and setting in the west. Intense auroral activity created various permeations in the pillar-like Birkeland current that connected Earth to the northern heavenly abode of Saturn. This is why we like light shows at rock concerts. Rock art, or petroglyphs, have captured these permeations in abundance and provide a useful view of the celestial sights witnessed by man during this golden age. It's a nice picture. The pinch effect on plasmas can lead to a shape that would have looked like a squatting man with arms held aloft in support of the heavens. See pictures below for image of plasma in a laboratory environment. Characteristic rendition of this auroral effect has been etched into rock faces the world over. Indeed, looks good. Yeah. Top left recreation of the basic squatter man pinch effect captured in plasma laboratory experiment. Top right, American petroglyphs with distinctive squatting man images. Middle right, Spanish squatter man. Bottom right, American starburst pattern. Bottom left, American squatter man under concentric circles. The emergence of totems in various cultures also reflects a heritage going back to the Golden Age, when Saturn's rings appeared as outstretched wing-like crescents atop a glowing ladder. I see. A speculative impression of the classic totem pole legacy as represented of the Earth's Birkeland current. When I was a kid, I just loved totem poles. I was just attracted to them. The twisting, spiraling nature of Birkeland filaments reaching out into space would sometimes terminate in a fork-like effect. This is clearly represented in various rock art petroglyphs as depicted in the above right insert. However, Saturn's spiral journey through space meant that a return to the point of contact with the Sun's heliosphere was inevitable for Saturn and its southerly string of planets. How many times this process repeated itself is unclear, but sufficient to say that each time an approach was made, catastrophic events, deluge, global firestorms, and massive Earth changes could be expected to unfold in both the heavens and on Earth. The Golden Age polar configuration of the Saturn system. Though the ancients would not have perceived this as such, the Saturnian polar configuration now consisted of 4 planets from Earth's perspective. First in line from the northern top of the configuration was, of course, Saturn, itself now surrounded by frozen water rings and orbited by 9 small followers. It still glowed brilliantly after its energizing contact with the Sun's heliosphere. Next in line was the feminine Venus, the evening star, the bride of Saturn, a planet that would display wonderful streamers of light when electrically excited that were seen as 4 and 8-pointed starbursts radiating out from Saturn's center. Whether Venus was ejected by Saturn during the first flare-up or had always been there is not fully understood, but the chaos monster that had heralded her appearance was a direct result of Venus coming to life. After Venus came masculine Mars, red in color, and seemingly enveloped in the womb of Venus. Mars was the morning star, son of Saturn, and viewed as the archetype rebellious hero, unseen during the purple dawn. The massive electrical discharge between Saturn and Mars had obliterated Mars' atmosphere, turning this planet's surface red. These 3, Saturn, Venus, and Mars, formed the heavenly abode, an abode that could only be reached via the heavenly ladder that was the giant plasma Birkeland current that rose from Earth's North Pole, the axis mundi of legend. Earth, the last in this string of planets, was now the humble abode of mere mortals. Interplanetary warfare. It was during these times that the ancients witnessed the beginnings of discord between these godlike planets and began to fear destructive visitations by these celestial bodies. The planet Mars, the dark pupil in the all-seeing eye that was Saturn, made close approaches to Earth along the length of the visible yet translucent plasma current joining the string of planets. Looming large, it would bombard the Earth with its Martian rocks and thunderbolts before reascending up to its position under Venus. which would itself flare and stream light in awesome displays of cosmic lightning and beauty. Yet Walt Thornhill said that the polar configuration could only work if Mars oscillated between Saturn and the Earth. At least one full-on thunderbolt-laden battle was waged between Venus and Mars, during which Mars suffered a great scarring injury that we now see today on its surface as the huge chasm called Valles Marineris. The warrior god, the scarred face, had earned his battle honors. Yes, that might have been what it looked like. And that was the story of the Iliad, too, if I'm not mistaken. The giant scar of Valles Marineris on the face of Mars, the result of extreme interplanetary electrical arcing between a newborn Venus and Mars, seen from Earth. These terrifying celestial battles have been etched onto the collective memories of mankind in their depictions of Mars as the scarred warrior hero and god of war. Such episodes were looked on with abject terror by Earth's inhabitants and probably accounted for various extinction events in the Earth's history, due to the destructive effects of these planetary fluctuations and close encounters. Also, and largely due to the day-night effect of the encroaching sun's equatorially orientated light source. Life on Earth under the Saturnian sun began to look different. Gone was the luxuriant reddish and purple hue of the planet's fauna, and the atmosphere now replaced by the more familiar green cast of Earth's forest and jungles, thanks to the different radiation frequencies caused by the flare-up. Deserts began to appear, and the oceans started to rise. More and more distant stars could be seen at night, and the various constellations began to take shape. Saturn and the Axis Mundi, at the height of the Golden Age, midday. Auroral activity at the base of the Axis Mundi would have created the illusion of a mountain from which the ladder to heaven ascended. This would be known as the Mountain of the Gods to most cultures, and most famously as Mount Olympus to the Greeks. The slide towards catastrophe. Gravity during the Golden Age started to get heavier. Now that two suns shed their energies over the Earth, with the planet possible increasing in actual size, due to its increased energy absorption being converted into mass, E equals mc squared. Massive fissures and cracks would have appeared on Earth as a result, with correspondingly dramatic increases in volcanic and earthquake activity. Eventually, Saturn and its family of planets were permanently captured by the Sun, with the result that the Sun began to make a closer yet stable and more regular passage across the sky from east to west. The Saturnian system's polar configuration continued to persist, with Saturn becoming ever dimmer during the day and starting to take on a sick, blotchy look at night. The legendary letter to heaven, that was the Birkeland current connection between Earth and Saturn, started to buckle and itself oscillate, giving the appearance of a decrepit figure now ruling in the northern sky. Already weakened by the various episodes involving the oscillations of Mars and Venus along its length, it was now only a matter of time before the interplanetary plasma current snapped altogether and Earth would be severed forever from the Saturnian heavenly abode. The catalyst came in the form of the Great Deluge. Doomsday had arrived.
You walk into this room at your own risk, because it leads to the future. This is not a new world. It is simply an extension of what began in the old one. It has patterned itself after every dictator who has ever planted the ripping imprint of a boot on the pages of history since the beginning of time. It has refinements, technological advances, and a more sophisticated approach to the destruction of human freedom. But like every one of the superstates that preceded it, it has one iron rule. Logic is an enemy and truth is a menace. Any state, any entity, any ideology that fails to recognize the worth, the dignity, the rights of man, that state is obsolete. A case to be filed under M for Mankind in the Twilight Zone.
Doomsday. A great cataclysm called the Deluge is said to have ended the bliss of the Golden Age. Saturn lost its position at Earth's celestial north, and Venus and Mars went on a cosmological rampage. During Saturn's initial flare-up, due to its first contact with the Sun's heliosphere, part of the ensuing chaos that enveloped Saturn had seen two filaments of discharged material escape into space, only to be captured by the Sun there for an unspecified time. They orbited their new star until such a time as when Saturn itself eventually became captured by the Sun. These filaments were primarily composed of Saturn's discharged particles of water, the remainder having been retained by Saturn to form that planet's distinctive ring. And what caused the end of the Golden Age? One of these frozen watery filaments collided with the Earth. As the Saturnian ring of planets was being captured by the Sun, this precipitated a deluge of water from space. It lasted for weeks. These filaments were primarily composed of Saturn's discharged particles of water. Atlantis sank beneath the weight. The great continent of Mu perished. Earthquakes of unimaginable magnitude raked the Earth, while giant winds scoured its surface. The Axis Mundi, Earth's fabled ladder to heaven, was irreparably damaged by this collision, and a decidedly sick, blotchy, and dimming Saturn was clearly starting to drift apart from its former system of planets. Severed from their electrical chain-like links to their original sun, the planets Venus and Mars ran amok. Those on Earth watched horrified as Venus took on comet-like aspect, turning into a Medusa and threatening the Earth with massive interplanetary lightning displays as it swooped by on its way to finding its new orbit. The breakup of the Saturnian system, Venus was transformed from a beautiful evening star to evil Medusa with flowing serpent-like hair, an archetype of the rampaging planet Venus, celebrated in art down through the centuries. Earth is overwhelmed by the effects of Venus' erratic behavior, while Mars battles the violent Medusa-like Venus. A collage by Troy incorporating the works of Duval, Backlund, Martin, and Caravaggio. I wonder if those skulls of Peru are reptilians. Planetary chaos. Mars was no better and constantly threatened to erratically swing by Earth at close quarters, while hurling stones and thunderbolts before it. Some of these Martian meteorites have been found as far afield as Antarctica. The subsequent series of battles in this free-for-all phase between Venus and Mars loomed large in the heaven and provided the inspiration for much of mythology's greatest stories. As if this were not enough, the slowly retreating Saturn, or at least its position in the sky over Earth, was now being stalked by another player in the grand cosmic drama, Jupiter. As Earth suffered under the onslaught of the deluge from heaven and the Axis Mundi all but disappeared, Saturn began a descent below the horizon. At this time, another bright star was seen to emerge in what had to have been Earth's southern skies. It too was seen to have rings, and due to the increased electrical activity in the region, also sported its own Birkeland current, which sent electrical arcing displays out into space around it, and gave the illusion to observers on Earth as if this new star were dangling by a rope. Called Zeus by the Greeks and Jupiter by the Romans, this previously hidden star seemed to briefly supplant the role of dying Saturn as the dominant force in the heaven. And this, or Zeus, was one of the Sun's planets. As it orbited into electrical contact with the Saturn system, it could be seen in Earth's southern skies, seemingly dangling on the end of its own Birkeland current. Faint rings could be detected around Jupiter, giving it the reputation of having stolen Saturn's rings. In mythology, Jupiter was the son of Saturn, who ended up murdering his father and replacing him. Jupiter is said to have tried stealing the rings of Saturn, an obvious reference to Jupiter's mythological murder of his cosmic father. And they said the same thing of Saturn with Uranus, too. The Jupiter was a part of the Sun's original solar system and acted as a partner in a binary star system. It is one possible contention. However, they share a common barycenter, so I would think that Jupiter would be offspring of the Sun, or born in the same group with it. Their oxygen matches too. This system may have been as much disrupted by the arrival of Saturn as Saturn's system was devastated by contacts on the big boy, with Jupiter then positioned in orbit around the Sun as it is today, though on a different radius. It can be speculated that it eventually joined the fray by gradually swinging in through Earth's southern skies, while on its regular orbit, and eventually appearing to come in from behind and below Saturn as seen from Earth. Another theory says that Jupiter and the other gas giants of Neptune and Uranus were always a part of the Saturnian system, but hidden from Earth on the other side of Saturn. Either way, mythology indicates that Jupiter seized Saturn's place and status in the heavens for a time, though Saturn eventually did make a sickly comeback as the reigning Lord of the Rings, as Earth righted itself after the axis-rocking events of the Great Deluge. However, the old god was dying, seemingly struck with leprosy, a result of increased atmospheric activity on the gaseous former star, and now sought permanent exile at the outer edges of the Sun solar system, where it remains to this day, a distant pinprick of light, somehow at odds with its reputation as one of mythology's greatest gods. With Saturn now drifting off into the outer distance, along with its 7 rings and 9 followers, a cataclysmically shocked Earth now found itself firmly in the grip of its new star, the Sun. The erratic and dangerous orbits of Mars and Venus continued to threaten the Earth, though, as they sought orbital and electrical balance with this new Sun. Whole new societies dedicated to tracking these violent entities rose up amongst the Earth's inhabitants, as the survivors and refugees from the Great Deluge fought to rebuild their shattered homeworld. The priesthoods were born, and with them, the world entered into the Silver Age. Oftentimes I wonder to myself, why does our society seem so upside down? Why is there such a conflict in every area of science? Why does this schism exist, not just in one place, but in all places? Why is the electric universe being ignored? Why is our history in such conflict? That's what's so hard to figure out. Who the good guys are and who the bad guys are. I found this interesting read here about Saturn. I'm going to read it to you. Alright, Sheriff in ancient Egypt was a lawgiver, and his badge was always a 6-pointed star, which is a symbol of Saturn. U.S. sheriffs in the Wild West, up to today, still wear the 6-pointed star. It is interesting that Saturn's symbol is the 6-pointed star. Well, now we know that it was also a 5-pointed and an 8-pointed star, so that was just one of its phases. Okay. Star. Saturn is the 6th planet from the Sun. Saturn Day is the 6th day of the week. Not really. Saturday is actually the 7th day of the week, Sunday being the 1st. People always seem to forget that. Now NASA is receiving images of the Saturn hexagon, a 6-sided atmospheric formation at Saturn's poles. The 6th chakra of the human energy system is the 3rd eye, pineal gland. 6 3 times is 666. When your third eye chakra opens, you develop your sixth sense of intuition. Well, it's a good one. And spirituality. From a consciousness perspective, the sixth sense, your intuitions, hunches, are messengers of God, your guardian angels. Isn't it interesting that angels have halos, rings, around their heads? And Saturn is the only planet with a halo or ring around it. Okay. That is why today, when you get married before God. And the symbol of that God is the ring that is put on each other's fingers. Don't get me started with that. The ring of Saturn. You're wearing God's ring. And the yarmulke was the round ring that you wear on your head for Saturn, your God. Even in the Middle Ages, in the temples, Catholic monks would shave their heads in a round circle, and Hebrews, instead of doing that, would wear the yarmulke. But it all had to do with the round rings of Saturn. Jordan Maxwell, Matrix of Power. The ancient name of Saturn was, as mentioned, El. It is the reason why those that were chosen by El were called elites. Oh, elites, okay. In fact, the words elect, elder, elevated, Elohim, temple, circle, gospel, apostle, disciple, evangelist, etc., all derived from the cult of El. Angels are messengers of God. Angel or angel too, for like a builder. But God was El, which is why we have the name of the archangels bearing the El suffix. Raphael, Michael, Uriel, Gabriel, Michael Sarion. Astrotheology and sidereal mythology. The plural term Elohim appears over 2,500 times in the Old Testament, but is falsely translated in most versions. This fact of plurality explains why, in Genesis, gods said, "Let us make man in our image." And I always wondered about that. As staged,
Plural.
as stated, Elohim refers to both gods and goddesses, and its singular form, El, served as a prefix or suffix to the name gods, people, and places, whence Emmanuel, Gabriel, Bethel, even except Satan was one of the Elohim. But I heard that Satan, now I don't know if this is true, but I heard this, in the ancient times before
Catholicism.
he made him into something bad. His name was actually Satan, the tester. Now I don't know if that's true or not, but puts a little bit of a different light on it, doesn't it? The gods of the Elohim, angels, the messengers of God. When witches cast a spell, they put the hex on someone. It is the elites who run the world today, and it's religion. In Islamic tradition, the rock is where Muhammad ascended to heaven, accompanied by the angel Gabriel. Atlantean, too, is the dome of the rock was built in the 600 AD era and was won back by the Israelites on 6/7/67 after the Six-Day War. The dome's outer walls measure 60, 6 times 10 feet, and 36, 6 times 6 feet. The Knights Templar claimed the dome of the rock was the site of the Temple of Solomon. Now I've heard Solomon means soul of man, salt of man, a couple of different things. I got that from Mr. Astrotheology, Benici, and set up their Templum Domini adjacent to it during the 12th century. 12. Saturn is an important key to understanding the long heritage this conspiracy has back to antiquity. The city of Rome was originally known as Saturnia, or the city of Saturn. That is true. The Roman Catholic Church retains much of the Saturn worship in its ritual. Saturn also relates to Lucifer. They have that observatory that they named the Lucifer Observatory. I always wondered that. In various occult dictionaries, Saturn is associated with evil. Saturn was important to the religion of Mithra and also to the Druids, Fritz Springmeier, bloodlines of the Illuminati. Rome was known to the Romans as Saturnia, not Rome, and Saturn was one of their gods. Black is both Saturn's color and Satan's color. I thought it was red. And he's in a red suit. The Black Holy Bible tells us Satan is 666. Satan is the sixth planet. Its symbol, the six-pointed star, is supposedly has a hexagon weather formation. Saturday is actually the seventh day, like I said, and they also used a 5-point and an 8-point star. So that's not entirely right. Is this all divine coincidence, or is our perception of Saturn and the other planets being manipulated by the Masonic magicians at NASA? And there's an answer that was really good to it. I conversed with Saturn on many occasions. Okay, request the Bible rewritten. Well, who knows? I don't know.
It's crazy.
But I'm going to give you a response that was pretty good to all that. The word police, here it's different. Pole-ice, P-O-L-E-I-C-E. Huh, how about that? Pole-ice. Okay, awesome. Interesting that humans are carbon-based life forms. And since the carbon atom has 6 protons, 6 neutrons, and 6 electrons, our number is 666. Okay, now this other person comes in named Zaro41 and really kind of sets it straight. My dear, you do not know anything of Saturn. You talk about things. The equation Saturn equals Satan was created by the Catholic Church to destroy the cult of Saturn, which was very strong in Italy and throughout the Roman Empire. Saturnus means divine intellect. Nus, the sacred fire. Of the state of being. Sat-Yuga was the Golden Age, and Saturnus was the god of being and time. Saturnus was the god of the Golden Age. The Latins spoken of the Saturna Regna, the reigns of Saturn, which were characterized precisely by the god as a symbol of royalty and wisdom. The treasure of Rome was under the temple of Saturn. The Catholic Church has converted Saturnalia into Christmas. Even in the 7th and 8th centuries, people honored the god of gold and being. The destruction of the cult of the god Saturnus was based on the equivalence of Saturn's equals Satan 666. Things are different from what history writes. The story is written by the winners, not the losers. I could write a book about the god Saturn. Well, that kind of changed it a little bit. I'm totally onto that. And then someone comes in and says this. The planet Saturn used to be extremely close to the Earth. Whether or not the Earth-Saturn system was as close to the Sun as present-day Earth is unknown. Viewing our solar system's past from the way it looks in present is chasing a dead end. It didn't always look this way. Saturn used to look much different and had no rings. It was in all likelihood a brown dwarf. Amen. The Earth's star, as the Far East still refers to it as Sol, Saturn, was a binary star system. Sol had planets of its own, and Earth was not. The Sun had planets of its own, and Earth was not one of them. Earth belonged to Saturn. Saturn appeared as an eye in the sky, the origin of the all-seeing eye. What happened? It got too close to the Sun. Tidal forces literally destroyed the planet. Venus was likely created from a Saturn ejection, as was the ice that make up its rings. It is possible that Saturn split into Jupiter and Saturn, or quite possibly one or both of the other gas giants. Yeah, that might be very possible, like Neptune. It's also possible that Jupiter's always orbited the Sun. Yes, indeed. They have the pretty much the same axial tilt, and they share a few other things as well, like oxygen. Jupiter and the Sun were the ancient solar system. Either way, the orbit of the Earth was changed. Tidal forces and debris set off volcanoes, wreaked havoc on the planet. Saturn, when visible, would have looked like a fiery winged disk during this destructive process. The raining ice particles would have flooded the planet. The influence of the Sun would have had a dramatic effect on all life. Eventually, things stabilized as they are today. with Saturn, our father, far from us. Mars, another Saturnian planet that had life, was placed in an orbit where life was unsustainable. How this would have looked to the intelligent creatures of Earth is likely the origin of many mythologies and religions. Well said. By the way, if Saturn was a brown dwarf, the sun's light might, depending on their orbit, shine down at an angle giving the impression of an arc. This is why, in Egyptian mythology, the sun rests on an arc or bull horns. Pretty good, pretty good. And this person's name was anonymous. Should have left your name. That was an excellent answer. That is on the AtlanteanConspiracy.com. I don't know much about it. I just happened to catch that. And let's not forget the human chakra system, which resembles Saturn and its rings.
The interesting where they smoke hashashin were luscious grounds, beautiful, luxurious places with lots of grass and flowers and fruits, and virgins. So this business about the virgin and the reward was done there by Chassanim.
That's where they get their idea of heaven from.
Right.
Huh.
That's where that came from.
Interesting.
You know. But this is all in Spencer's Encyclopedia of the Occult. He himself, Spence, the author, was a Rosicrucian. That's another Sufi group. I don't want to go into the Rose Cross. So that's where that came from.
So you're saying that there are all these different organizations. One is the Sabbatian cult, which are Jews that were kicked out of Judaism. There's the Illuminati, which were not Jews. They were Gentiles who had their own little secret thing. You've got today's Skull and Bones Society that we heard about with Yale University and President Bush and many popular, I should say popular, but many famous politicians today.
Professor Anthony Sutton wrote about that in depth, too. He was the one that I just quoted earlier as being the author of Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution and Wall Street and the Rise of Hitler. So Anthony Sutton has written about that. He has a separate book out on that. Now I can tell you that in my 2 volumes, I start showing straight lines from the Illuminati and the Frankists, the Haskalah movement, the Jacobin Society, the Reform movement, and different years that initiatives had. The Illuminati were involved to destroy the Bible and biblical authority and to help promote biblical criticism in the university.
Policies and agendas and who's running things. So Rabbi Antelman, what you're saying is that a lot of this started with a cult of people who thought that Shabtai Tzvi, who lived in the 16th century or the 17th century?
1626, 1676.
Okay, he claimed that he was the Messiah. In the end, he got so many followers that he was a threat to the kingdom, so the Sultan said either convert or die. He was jailed. He was put in prison. He chose to convert to Islam, lost a lot of followers, but there's still some hardcore members, and they took what he was teaching and they perverted it even more, and they decided that in order to bring the Messiah, we have to have everybody sin, so the world gets to such a low level, God has to come in.
Nothing in this world is evil. It is the intention behind that makes it so. Saturn is a planet, a powerful energy that has been utilized by the forces of darkness and of light. You can't just generalize it and say it's bad. That's good. And someone here mentions Plato's The Statesman. I'm going to have to read that because I've heard a lot about it lately. I just don't want to get political. I agree with Mark Twain. If it really made a difference, they wouldn't let us do it.
What did I do to deserve such a fate?
Just a thought. You know, intuition is a right brain function, but so is gambling or chance taking. There's been many times that the gambler in me overrode the good sense intuition. How many times can you think you could say that? Your intuition was right, but the gambler in you took over and you still ended up with egg on your face, like me. For the record, people will take an oath in front of God and then balk when it comes time to owe up to the vows. Nobody knows the meaning of the word commitment. Well, not nobody, but put near. Like Bukowski said, beware the average man and the average woman. Beware their love, for their love is average. Wiggleby? I think that Lucifer is supposed to be equated to Venus, the illuminated one. I'm pretty sure. Also, in 1936, somebody changed the tuning for A from 432, which is supposed to be the natural hertz of the Earth, to 440, just to disrupt the Earth. Seriously, what is going on? Why all this hatred and just crap that has been thrown into the whole thing? Whoever it is, they're anti-human being. It doesn't matter what color we are or what God we pray to. To me, we're all just auditioning in the mud for the next level. And if you spend your life hating any group, you're going to come back maybe as that group. So that's just something to think about. I think the world needs some more love. Just think how boring it would be if we all looked the same, you know? I think diversity can be a good thing. There isn't anybody better than anybody else. We're all the same. It don't make sense, you know? I mean, we're all victims to a certain point. We're born, we become aware, we live our lives, and we all have to die. And maybe the ones we answer to is our higher self, which I do believe we all have. And just forget about all that hate crap. Well, Troy had to get past a whole new paradigm before he got into the whole death cult aspect of it, which will be the next episode. So until then, please like, share, or comment. The more attention or the more love you give this video, the more eyes it will reach. Take care, and I'll see you on down the road.
Using the standard model of stars. So the solution? Completely ad hoc. The object must have twice the surface area, it must be twins. Now the electric universe says, I mean, that is just an amazing ad hoc solution. The spectra of red dwarfs are crowded with molecular absorption features that are not well understood, so it's hard to extract the physical properties of a given red dwarf from its spectrum. That is also interesting. But the fact that there are so many molecular absorption features indicates that all of the requirements for life exist within that glowing envelope. So, all stars are electric. All red stars are gigantic. Planets can orbit within their anode glow, and even astronomers acknowledge that. They have suggested that there could be satellites orbiting within the Betelgeuse glow. However, with their notion that the red giant is formed by an ultra-hot core, those planets would not be suitable for life. In the electric universe, it has a cool core. Objects orbiting within the red envelope are suitable for life. Now, one of the very interesting things is that there are no seasons on any satellites orbiting within that red sphere, because the energy received on any body within that sphere is equal over the entire surface of that body. So that a planet orbiting within that red sphere has no seasons, even temperatures. In fact, I would say the brown dwarfs are the cosmic wombs of life in the universe. One of the interesting facts, of course, that would suddenly come out of this is that these red spheres are glowing plasma, and glowing plasma will not let radio waves pass through. So the search for extraterrestrial intelligence using radio waves is, in my opinion, a wasted effort, because anyone living on a satellite inside one of these glowing red wombs would not even be aware that there was a greater universe out there full of stars, let alone try and use radio, because any radio signals would not pierce that plasma. Just an interesting side issue here. So this is my view of Proto-Saturn, and I've just put 2 satellites there, but there are obviously more. Titan, for instance, would have been one of the satellites. Earth and Mars. So there they are inside this glowing shell. And the evidence of the earliest recollections of mankind appears to be that the purple dawn of creation was the skylight. That was the colour of the sky, purple dawn. And that is precisely the colour you would expect in this circumstance, because you have the red end of the spectrum, and you also have a certain amount of the violet and ultraviolet light due to electrical activity in the plasma. So this fits with the, if you like, the earliest recollections of mankind, that was our environment. 50% of red dwarfs have Earth-sized planets in their habitable zone. Remember I said that astronomers feel this is the place where life is most likely to be found. Now if you look at Jupiter, for instance, and consider that as a red dwarf and its plasma sphere was lit up, Io has a 1.75 day orbit, Europa has a 3.5 day orbit, Ganymede 7 days and Callisto 17 days. Any of the satellites that were released from Jupiter's grip would have a rotation rate which equaled their daily rotation rate, because they're locked always with the same face towards the central body. It suggests that the Earth and Mars had orbits which were about a day in length. This is the kind of information that you can get from this kind of model. The other thing is, you'll notice in this diagram, there is no Venus. So, we have a huge red anode glow, which was what we call proto-Saturn. We had a purple dawn of creation and no Venus. These are the important things to understand about proto-Saturn. Just recently, a map of a nearby red dwarf was produced using a Doppler imaging technique. It's one of a pair of red dwarfs near Alpha Centauri with a separation of 3 astronomical units. There's a bright near-polar region which can be clearly seen in the upper right panels, and a darker mid-latitude area visible in the lower left panels is consistent with large-scale cloud inhomogeneities. However, that's an assumption that what we're looking at is an atmosphere, but we're not looking at an atmosphere, we're looking at a plasma sheath. So this variation said in the electric universe model will be due to objects orbiting within that plasma sheath, either inside or outside that plasma sheath, because that would affect the discharge. The other thing is that this bright spot towards the pole is the same kind of thing that's found at Betelgeuse, the red giant, which indicates that that's the electrical connection with the Birkeland currents that drive these particular stars. If I'm right, the patterns here should be more repetitive than weather patterns and without banding like Jupiter, which is undetectable so far by this technique, but you never know what they can do tomorrow. Red dwarfs and giants change in radius, which is not the kind of thing that you would expect if this is a normal body. However, this change in radius is the star's response to changes in its electrical environment. It's quite natural. It's a plasma effect. They also tend to flicker in brightness. All of this is indicative of a star lacking the stabilising effect of the bright photosphere of bright stars. That's according to Don Scott's transistor model. That is a stabilising influence in all bright stars. Red stars don't have that luxury. Proto-Saturn's capture. This is the interesting part of it. This took me decades to try and figure out, because the model of planets arranged with their poles in a line is unstable. There's no Newtonian theory to explain a daisy chain of planets. So it eventually dawned on me that what we had was a dynamic arrangement where Proto-Saturn, which is in this diagram over here, that's Proto-Saturn, and you can just see a few little brighter red dots behind it. They are the Earth and Mars and other satellites. That's meant to represent those satellites. The explanation came to me once I had realised that the stabilisation of the planetary orbits as we see them today, why is the Newtonian system a clockwork system, or it appears to be a clockwork system, when you only have one force? Well, the answer is you cannot have a stable system with one force. There has to be a feedback mechanism. And as I explained the other day, you can change the mass of a planet or a star by either placing charge on it or taking charge away. And it occurred to me that a small star like proto-Saturn entering the environment of the Sun would suffer a drastic change in its electrical environment, with a result, actually, that proto-Saturn would have become one gigantic comet, because a body which is negatively charged with respect to its environment is a cometary body, and a body that's positively charged with respect to its environment is an anode in the discharge, and it is a star. So this was a change, a sudden change, once proto-Saturn approached the solar system at that time closely. At least it would have been most drastic once it entered the heliosphere, the boundary of the Sun's environment with interstellar space. So Saturn as a comet is removing electrons, and the result is that it is losing mass, it's accelerating towards the Sun. The bodies behind it, actually, sorry, I got that around the wrong way. The proto-Saturn itself is losing electrons, as comets do. They are being passed on to its satellites. The satellites are gaining in mass. Saturn is losing in mass. Conservation of energy says that proto-Saturn accelerates towards the Sun, and this is part of the electrical capture mechanism. The Earth and Mars and the other satellites gaining in mass will tend to fall behind and line up, rather like Comet Shoemaker Levy 9. The electrical discharge, the polar discharge, in my opinion then, is the central column of Saturn's cometary discharge. We were sitting in this cometary tail, right in the middle of it. And all of the plasma discharge effects that were witnessed by the ancients and chiselled into rock come from that period of capture. I've said as a cometary body, proto-Saturn loses electrons, it accelerates towards the Sun. All of this could explain all of the plasma phenomena, discharge phenomena, recounted by Dave Talbot and Eduardo Cardona. The latest measurements by Pitieva and Standish suggest the astronomical unit is increasing about 23 feet per century. That means that the Earth is actually, its orbit is shifting over time. But according to the beliefs of astronomers, the astronomical unit shouldn't change at all. The mechanism I'm describing for the modification of gravity provides a mechanism that can be tested, because the Earth's orbit expansion should be a discontinuous function with discrete jumps following major solar storms and at Venus's inferior conjunction, when we sit in the cometary tail of Venus. So there are various means of testing these ideas too, outrageous as they may seem.